If I told you,
In
wait,
any
if you
way,
believed that the country was teetering on fascism, you don't think it would be justified to use violence to prevent that?
I don't think it would be effective.
But that's also your read, right? Like, that's just like, it's a very strange thing to levy on someone. Like, well, you know, I just ascertain based on the words you said that certain people could interpret those words to then believe that they should go take up violent arms. Yay! We got Sam Seder doing debates. Sam Seder's doing a bit of a tour right now. He's just debating everyone. He was greeted by that race realist, actual justice warrior the other day, and then apparently he jumped onto the Adam and Sitch show to talk about Jimmy Dore.
When is the Jimmy Dore debate? Well, I still swear to Sitch that Jimmy's going to come back on the show, but Sitch doesn't seem to think so. Well, that was my question. When is the Jimmy Dore debate? I saw you give him a hard time on Twitter, Sam. What happened there?
I don't know if you know the history of Jimmy and I don't have too much time to go into it. But in 2016, when he was on the Young Turks, he did an episode of a show. I can't remember what they called it. It wasn't the Young Turks. It was some other show that he was doing with some other Young Turks people. And he said, there's nothing wrong with Peter Thiel on.
Steve, yeah, unfortunately that it's not real. The weird soundbite of him being like hungry, that's actually from a bad lip reading that everyone just assumed was a real DeSantis clip.
The Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court does a joke, and the Democrats will be able to filibuster just like the Republicans did. And I sent him an email the night before, and I said, I saw the clip, and I said, hey, I'm gonna talk about this clip because I think you're wrong on about 5 different things here. And if you want to come on and talk about it, let's come on. Because you know, I wasn't friendly with, I wasn't friends with Jimmy, but it's.
Emma is the true debate lord of the left.
Sure.
And he said, no, go to town. He's too busy. And I start to do it, and he calls into the show. We have open lines, and he called in, and so we began a debate where he clearly didn't know what a filibuster was. He did not know why the Republicans were able not to give Merrick Garland a hearing, and assumed that the Democrats could do it. He was giving, in my mind, Democrats too much credit for being able to stop.
When did he debate Jimmy Dore? That must have been a long time ago, right?
A potential Trump Supreme Court pick. I said, what happens if we get 3 Supreme Court nominees? He said something to the effect of like, what happens if the moon falls in Lake Michigan?
2016, yeah, that was a long time ago.
Wrong about everything. And I specifically remember Michael Brooks, who was far more generous person than I am towards people.
I just want to see a little bit of it. This was from 2016. Wow.
Jimmy, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Were your ears burning?
Yes, they were.
All right. Well, to be fair, I gave you a heads up that we were going to do this.
Now, Sam, if you're gonna do this kind of blindsiding with me without any warning whatsoever or heads up or even give me a chance to rebut you, that is so dishonest.
Well, Jimmy's funny. I did send him an email and tell him to do this, but it was, to be fair, it was also last night that I did that. So
maybe send me an email maybe the night before to let me know you're going to do this.
Well, I appreciate you having a sense of humor about it. But talk to me about it, because I still have more of your tape, and we can go over that tape.
Sam, I like you. I like your show. I would come on your show whenever you want me to come on. So all you do is a little email or a text or something.
Well, that's changed, eh?
Let me know you're going to be ripping me a new asshole, and I'll show up.
Well, I'm trying to overlay it on your existing one, if it makes you feel better.
Hey, you know what?
Apparently he can. He was just... But this was the next thing I was going to get to. I understand. You're saying, why can't the Democrats do this?
Right.
You said on the tape here that the Republicans are filibustering. They're not filibustering.
No, they're not filibustering. That was you correct. You corrected
The
correctly on that. They're not.
The Democrats, there is no one who has ever even speculated that it's possible for Donald Trump to win the presidency and for the Democrats to take back the Senate. Those two things cannot happen. And so the Democrats don't have the ability to not provide a hearing for Donald Trump's nominee. There's no way the Republicans are going to go 4 years without
No, I haven't done a
hearing
tavern. I got to do that still.
on they can maybe get away with this with Obama, and they can play out the clock for 6 or 7 months because there's a huge presidential election going on, so the media has been distracted somewhat. But I can tell you that in January, there's only going to be one story. Maybe there'll be two. One will be how, if Hillary Clinton's the president, one will be how the Republicans are threatening to shut down the government again. And the other one will be they're refusing to hold hearings for her nominee. And that will just go on and on because there's not going to be anything else that's going on. It's going to be a fundamentally different media era. So I don't think they're going to be able to hold out for 4 years. And Democrats certainly wouldn't be able to hold out for 4 years because they don't believe in the destruction of the Senate as an institution in the way that Republicans do. And frankly, I'm glad about that.
Okay, so you don't. So here's my theory. I'll just give you my theory: is that if the Republicans can do this to a guy like Merrick Garland, that they've already said is a great justice, for a whole year without batting an eye and paying no political price for it, I say the Democrats will be able to filibuster someone that Donald Trump nominated, and then in 2 years, the Senate, in my opinion, it would flip to Republicans just because of. I agree with Chris Hayes when he says that if Donald Trump becomes president, it's the destruction of the Republican Party, and Paul Ryan is not going to usher any of his crazy policies through Congress. So they fracture, and the Senate flips to Democrat. They were saying it was almost going to happen this year. But,
yeah, but you know the difference between, I mean, Jimmy, surely you know the difference between how many Senate Republicans are running for re-election this year versus 2 years from now, right? You know the difference, right? We have 2/3 of the race is our Senate's Republicans up for a race, and in 2 years we have 2 times the number of Democrats who are up for re-election. So the idea of the Democrats taking back the Senate in 2018 is an extreme long shot. The idea that Paul Ryan may not pursue any of Donald Trump's crazy legislation, but he will pursue Paul Ryan's crazy legislation, and Donald Trump will surely sign it. Why wouldn't he?
Okay, so
you're going to let Paul Ryan? Would you want Paul Ryan to be president? This guy wants to privatize Medicare.
Paul Ryan. Wow, this was a long time ago.
He wants to cut any type of social safety net. He wants to get rid of the estate taxes.
Yeah.
I mean, why is his agenda any better than Donald Trump's? Even if you believe Donald Trump is not even going to do anything except for sign legislation, that's bad enough.
Yeah, Sam, we're on the same side most things. I'll just disagree with
Jimmy,
you.
no, wait a second. No, we're not. Because
politically, except for Hillary Clinton in the Supreme Court, we disagree 100% on that. And I think that if Donald Trump is president, it's way worse for the Republicans. And if Hillary Clinton is, I agree with Chris Hayes when he says Hillary Clinton is good for the Republican Party and Donald Trump is bad for it. I agree with him.
I agree with that too. But in the meantime, we have a Supreme Court that is going to be moved to the right for generations. In the meantime,
wow, how much of this turned out to be true, eh?
I mean, you haven't given me an argument that rebuts what I said, that the Democrats could easily filibuster.
And we should be using this for all of the fucking, like, I feel like the same thing is playing itself out over and over and over again when you've got that section of people who are like, the two parties are basically identical, and Joe Biden's a fascist and it's the exact same party, so it doesn't matter, like, you know, blah blah. And then you're like, that's just not true. You know, one side is just going so decidedly forward with a whole bunch of policies that you can only associate directly with like Christian fascists at this point. There is a noticeable difference.
Any bad appointee, and they can say, hey, until you give us someone as good as Merrick Garland, we're going to keep filibustering this. And all we have to do is do it for 2 years. And my proof that they could do it is that the Republicans are doing it to a guy like Merrick Garland, who they already said they like, without batting an eye for a year. So I just disagree with you on this, Sam, on the Supreme Court. I just disagree.
And what about when Justice Breyer or Justice Ginsburg pass away or retire?
Yeah, I mean,
so they're going to filibuster. They're going to prevent 2 vacancies from being filled.
It's not like you can't have 2 shitty parties. You absolutely can. I just think for people, and this is going back to, you know, this was obviously pre, you know, the Trump administration, but like the concept that, hey, by the way, the potential downfalls of having a Trump presidency are so serious that if he does that, you could see multiple Supreme Court appointments that will have, lasting effects upon major decision making and policy in the United States for generations. Like it is a huge fucking risk and not one that should be taken lightly. That turned out to be entirely accurate.
And then you think, based on that in the context of American society as you know it, without a presidential election going on, that the Democrats are going to retake the Senate, even though they have twice as many people up for re-election.
I mean, Sam, did you think that Hillary Clinton was a stronger candidate than Bernie Sanders against the Republicans?
No.
You didn't? You always thought Bernie Sanders was a stronger candidate than Hillary Clinton against the Republicans?
Yeah.
Of
I mean,
course.
particularly against Donald Trump.
Oh, I thought I had you on that one. God damn it. So I was trying to impugn your forecasting ability.
Oh, that looks bad considering this was 2016 and most of everything that Sam said so far has come true.
I'm saying I don't agree with that forecast. You know, you're saying, what if there's 2 justices? What if there's 3 justices? I'm saying as it stands right now, the Republicans aren't even giving a hearing to a guy they say is great for a year. Why can't the Democrats do the same thing, Sam? Why can't they filibuster a bad justice?
I don't know. Why can't I fly? Because I don't have wings. I mean, the fact is, Jimmy,
That's not an
is that
answer.
you are taking, I mean, the what you're talking about, there's no, you're just positing things to happen. That is like, you know, it's like dropping a marble down a pachinko ladder and just saying like, well, if it hits here and it hits there and it hits there, it's going to land here. But the fact is, none of those things can logically follow each other.
I 100% disagree with you.
Well, I know that.
What do you say about the point that Chris Hayes made and Ben Howe made from Red State? They're both in agreement that Ben Howe is telling people, his conservative friends, to vote for Hillary if they care about the safety or the life of the Republican Party and the conservative movement. Because if that
So is this why Jimmy Dore will never debate again? Is this why? Because like he's one of those people who went through a little bit of that cycle of being like, yeah, it's just like there's no one who will like, you know, accept the challenge. No one's willing to discuss these issues or debate them. And then Sam's always the person that's like, yeah, right here. I will. We have comparable levels. You can't say that I'm doing it just for clout, or you can't say that I'm, you know, you're platforming me or something.
Donald Trump is president, it wrecks it. And they won't be able to get a governing majority, he said, for maybe decades. So you can vote for Hillary Clinton. I'm going to vote for the destruction of the Republican Party, as according to Chris Hayes and Ben Howe.
Well, I think Chris Hayes would tell you to vote for Hillary Clinton. And
I
Ben
know,
Howe,
but he's going against his own logic.
I don't think he is. I suspect that maybe you're just misinterpreting what he's saying. Do I think that Donald Trump is bad for the conservative party? I mean, the conservative movement? Yes. I think he's bad for the conservative movement, whether he wins or loses. Is it bad for the Republican Party if he wins? I'll tell you what happens if he wins. What he wins is like people like Ben Howe lose. They lose their job. But there are other people who win. And those people will continue on, and they will just continue. It's not like the Republican Party is going to say, oh, what's become of us? I mean, look at the way they're reacting now.
Yes, I agree. So in my idea, just let me clarify that idea of people coalescing. I mean that if Hillary Clinton is president, like right now, Barack Obama's president, he's pushing the TPP, which you pointed out, a lot of Democrats are against, right?
Right.
Yet there's a chance he still might get it through, which is why he's pushing for it, because he knows there's a chance.
Well,
so
he wants it to go through. That's why he's pushing it. He knows that it's in trouble. That's why he's having to work so hard. And frankly, I think that I think there's plenty of evidence that it's not going to happen, at the very least on his watch.
Yeah, that's good news, right? So,
yes,
So my point is, he helped split the opposition
already.
Is not as bad.
He wouldn't go along with him, and then ultimately the Democratic Party got strengthened, and they completely changed their position on it by 180 degrees. That is what I expect that dynamic to continue.
Yes, I remember when George Bush also proposed privatizing Social Security, and it was dead on arrival because...
Well, privatizing Social Security is far more extreme than simply cutting benefits.
Right.
But I'm in favor of expanding benefits, and the Democratic Party is now, that's the official position of the Democratic Party and all of the Democrats in the Senate.
Right. Did you know since Bernie endorsed her, Hillary stopped talking about climate change in her speeches? You know, she's exporting fracking around the world. She says the Republicans don't accept the science of climate change. She says she does. And we all know the science says that.
Yeah, Hillary Clinton sucks.
Fracking is way worse for climate change than anyone believes.
It's not Sam's position that she doesn't.
So that's the kind of thing, the doublespeak, that people can't give their vote to. I can't give my vote to that, Sam.
So you're going to enable the guy who thinks that climate change is a hoax because you think that's going to get us further down the line?
No. I say it's time for a revolution, and we have to throw off the deal.
I say time for a revolution. Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people who 2016 basically just made them all think that, hey, now's the time to put like the communist emoji in my name and then just go forward and not really have any grounded beliefs when it comes to any of these issues.
Liberal agenda, which is pro-fracking, which is anti-climate change and anti-science. And, we are going to have to, right now.
Do you think Donald Trump would have okayed the Keystone Pipeline?
And Donald Trump was such a disaster. Like, now you can look back on it, such an objective disaster for the environment.
Yes.
Me too. Do you think Donald Trump will do that when he gets into office?
Yes. I think he'll do all the bad things you can think of. I think
so
that,
why would you not why would you not want to put someone who's in position who is going to be relying on your votes to get reelected, who's going to have to address Bernie Sanders as a powerful senator in her own party? Why would you not want that person who is closer to, even if you think that she's a horrible human being who is going to continue to wreck the planet, and you and I, maybe we agree on that. Why would you not want that person in charge because they are more accountable to Bernie Sanders and Bill McKibben and to the Democrats in the House who are against these things than Donald Trump, who could give F all about those people and in fact benefits politically from telling them to go F off?
Right, and my reason is because I'm playing a longer game. I see we have struck Trump.
How much time do you think we have?
2 years.
2 years?
2 years, and then 2 years we flip. And by the way, and people are forgetting, that they're going to be redoing the gerrymandering based on the census that's coming up, right?
Why do you think the Democrats are going to control the state houses?
No, they're not. That's what I'm saying. That what
2016 was an eternity ago. It does seem like a really long time ago. I understand why Jimmy Dore doesn't want to have round two.
IMing me saying, don't go for the neck on Jimmy, and I didn't. I mean, I tried to, within certain constraints, not go after him too hard. Although what he was saying was complete gibberish, nonsense, ridiculousness, stupidity, and he said, "Let's have you come back on my show. We'll talk about it." And then he ghosted me after that.
Wow.
And so I do not think that Jimmy's interested in debating me. It's been 7 years, I think, since then. So.
Well, I still swear to Sitch that Jimmy's going to come back on the show, but Sitch doesn't seem to think so. So
I don't.
Y'all didn't really talk about anything.
You've just spent an hour on one video that I did. I don't know how many months ago, or was it a year ago, or whenever.
This was a couple weeks ago.
And this was a couple of weeks ago?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're telling me you just spent an hour taking issue with my interpretation of this guy advocating for this law, with the idea that what happened in the Oklahoma race massacre was a question of bad actions by individuals, and you're telling me that that is misinformation. But you're saying that because I say these are, and I've said this, I think, quite often, that I don't know if this is fascism as much as it is steps that are necessary, incremental steps towards fascism, that I'm inciting violence?
I said so, and you even said this. I don't know when you upload your show versus when you do it. You had clips just like the day before yesterday, where you were talking about the anti-CRT laws in Florida being the incremental steps to fascism. And as you said, you've said this several times. This is a repeated theme of your show. And I'm saying that this is,
and so
me,
you're interpreting that
as
a call to violence?
No, I'm not interpreting you as saying this is a call to violence. What I'm saying is that if you paint this picture, no, I'm saying if you paint this picture in your audience's mind that we're teetering on the edge of fascism, okay? If you were to tell me, Sitch, we're teetering on the edge of white supremacy and fascism, okay? I think it's reasonable that a reasonable person hearing that and believing that would say, I need to use violence to prevent my country from going to fascism. And you're kind of setting people up.
I don't know who you're hanging out with. But no, I don't see how would violence.
Wait, if I told you, if you believed that the country was teetering on fascism, you don't think it would be justified to use violence to prevent that?
I don't think it would be effective.
But that's also your read, right? Like, that's just like, it's a very strange thing to levy on someone. Like, well, I just ascertain based on the words you said that certain people could interpret those words to then believe that they should go take up violent arms.
I don't think one individual perpetrating
I said justified,
violence,
not effective. I said justified.
Well, I wouldn't advocate it. No, and I know.
I'm saying, do you think it would be justified for if someone thinks, or actually, I should say justified? Do you think it'd be reasonable? Do you think it'd be reasonable that a reasonable person would try to use violence to stop their country from?
No, I don't think it'd be reasonable because I can't possibly think of like how an individual's act of violence is going to stop fascism.
Yeah, but here's
how would that happen?
I know that you don't, but other people do.
Well, but you're saying reasonable, and you explain to me how that would happen. If it's a reasonable concept, it's easy for you to explain to me.
Yeah, because if someone says, okay, my country is literally teetering on fascism,
And so
I'm trying to vote. I'm trying to vote.
What's your
I'm trying to
reasonable
explain
action that you're going to take?
I'm trying to explain it to you. If someone says my country's teetering on fascism and white supremacy, and I'm going out there and I'm voting, and it's not making a difference, okay, I need to go out with my friends. We need to organize some kind of violent resistance under.
Okay, well, I mean, cool story. That sounds like you. That sounds like a scenario that you and your friends are coming to terms with.
Underground movement, or we're going to get guns, we're going to go after people.
Yeah, this is an extreme projection.
Start blowing up buildings. We're going to
Who
fight
are you going to
against
blow
the
up and
fascists.
go after?
They could go after the governor. They could go after the state legislatures. What do you mean? They start burning
So
down these
you
buildings.
think it's
They
a
could start kidnapping these
reasonable-
people.
wait a second.
I mean,
You're
there's
telling
literally,
me-
remember, there's a
wait,
plot.
Yeah, this is an unbelievably desperate dig. Wow.
One at a time, guys.
Like
One
not
at a
that long
time.
ago.
Let me just be clear. You think it's a reasonable action for people to fight fascism by assassinating a governor of the state of Oklahoma or something?
Do you think it would have been reasonable for people to assassinate Hitler before he rose to power?
I don't know how you would anticipate that he was going to do that.
You could read Mein Kampf in his prison cell. When he wrote in his prison cell about how the Jew, like if you're Jewish in Germany and Hitler's rising to power and you read Mein Kampf, you'd be like, holy shit, I got to get this guy to power.
In retrospect,
No, it's 125. It's not 15. Yeah, it's 125.
I'm talking not even in retrospect, preemptively.
Well, I obviously I don't think anybody even contemplated doing that before he rose to power. I mean,
I don't think
know
they
what your
expected
standard
him to rise to power. But
This is utterly ridiculous, though. Like, to bring someone on and be like, okay, so you use the term fascist or perhaps steps towards fascism. That's pretty much a call to violence. Well, the answer is no, that's not. Well, I mean, if someone was to hear that their government could possibly be going in towards fascism, isn't it reasonable to assume that they're going to take up violent arms? And it's like, I mean, by me saying that I like coffee, someone could interpret that to be like, oh, well, Lance is signaling us to destroy all of the tea leaves in Canada or something like that. I suppose someone could interpret that. That's far from me doing a call to violent arms.
I'm saying now, especially now with that
that's my
context.
point.
Yeah, but now it's even worse because now you have the context of Hitler.
Yeah,
now
it's
you have the
deeply
context of
unserious.
fascism, which is why you're kind of
mean,
invoking fascism in this conversation when we talk about these topics.
No. I don't know what to tell you. I mean, if you think it's reasonable for someone to go out and that it's a reasonable concept for people to
I think a
organize,
reasonable person could come to that conclusion that it's reasonable to fight fascism with violence.
I disagree.
So you think all the Antifa people are crazy and unreasonable?
I don't think the Antifa people are going out and trying to assassinate anybody.
No, but they believe that they are justified in using violence to stop fascism. They
Well,
definitely
I think
believe
they
that 100%.
literally go out and try and defend,
So shouldn't you be interviewing Antifa or one of the CEOs?
put themselves between people for the most part. My understanding of what Antifa does is they get in between fascists and the people that fascists are attacking. That's different than going out and assassinating political figures. There's never been anything remotely like that, as far as I'm aware of.
Well, first of all, I mean,
Oh yeah, no, and honestly, just pointing out that people are displaying fascistic tendencies, that in no way is in the same breath saying and ... And now here's the actions that you must take upon yourselves immediately, comrades. Like, no, you are adding all of that. Like I said, it's all projection.
first of all, there was the Gavin Long situation where he literally was listening to Jimmy Dore and other people like that, talk about how we live in this white supremacy society, and it definitely motivated him pretty directly to go out and start assassinating police officers. Okay, so that did happen. This isn't like something that's never happened before, number one. And number two, the thing, the reason why I'm surprised you say this is because—
You want me to defend Jimmy Dore?
No, I don't. But I'm just saying that there's a track record for something like this happening. But number two, you literally,
Well, I don't
the other
use
day,
the same rhetoric as Jimmy Dore does. I think people are
well, when you talk about incremental steps of fascism, I mean, you literally had the other day someone call into your show and say, Sam, I listened to your show a lot, and I feel like it's time for the left to start advocating for violence. That happened on your show like 2 days ago.
He's reacting to the news, and I specifically said, don't do that.
You said, well, first of all, it's a very weird conversation because you said you would, and let me bring up exactly what you said.
And we should be clear, I have open phone lines. So it's not somebody I invited to come.
No, I understand that. Okay. You said that the first thing you said was that you would never critique the sense of frustration, desire, or compulsion, that there needs to be some type of violent response, which that's not exactly what I would say. But then after it, you did say that you practically didn't think violence would bring about change in a positive way. But you didn't really talk about like a moral condemnation of it. You didn't call the man crazy or unreasonable or anything of that nature. You just said, well, I don't think it'll work practically.
And by the way, on these stats, when you see left-wing, that's because they usually associate eco-terrorism and eco-terrorist acts with left-wing extremism, which is where some of those come from.
I agree. I don't think it would work practically. I don't think a reasonable person would assume that it would.
Morally, you don't have a problem with it?
No, I don't find it like my morality is just not something that I necessarily talk about. I don't have to justify my morality to you. You're talking about me advocating violence, and I'm not. You just quoted
I didn't say
me
you
saying,
advocated
don't
violence.
do it.
I never
and
said,
I don't think a reasonable person would.
I never said you advocate for violence. What I said is
Yeah, and I don't think a reasonable person would interpret the words that he said as a call to violence. So it's just on its surface ridiculous.
That your rhetoric can lead people down this path, and you have
I
someone who's literally
disagree
called into
with
your
that.
show who says, "I listen to your show a lot, and I feel like we're getting there."
It's not my rhetoric. It is the reality of what we're dealing with in this country.
So when you talk about, well, wait a minute, you say the reality of what we're dealing with. It's your perception of reality is that we're going on this path to white supremacy and fascism.
Let me preface
and you
by
talk
saying
about
this. I should have said this
repeatedly,
when I came on.
and
when
someone
I
calls
talk
into your
about
show
things,
and says, "This is how I feel
perspective.
about things."
One at a time, guys. One of you can talk. Go ahead.
Okay.
Well, I mean, yes. When I'm talking, just as I assume that you are talking about your perception, and I'm talking about my perception.
Right.
And yes, we disagree. You see what's going on. You don't see a problem. I would see what's going on over the course of the past 20 years, and a rise in attacks on marginal people. We just had a guy got knifed to death in Brooklyn the other night because he was gay. I see this resurgence of homophobia. I see this resurgence of transphobia. I see this backlash against CRT, a thing that vast majority of people who want to get rid of it can't even define, but they think that it's associated with, in some way, Black people being emancipated. I see right-wing pundits who are making a ton of cash off of attacking trans people and gay people, some of the most marginalized people in our society. And yes, I find it alarming, and I find it a step towards fascism. I think what DeSantis is doing with his relentless talk of woke ideology, which is a sort of like this blanket term, which in my estimation, again, my perception, my opinion, if people think this is misinformation, I think they have a blinkered notion of what misinformation is, but that is all coded language that is supposed to basically play on racism, which is endemic in this country. And it has been endemic in this country for, arguably maybe endemic in this country since its founding. And at different times, it can be exacerbated in part because of the economic situation, in part because of the demographic situation. And yeah, I think that we are taking incremental steps towards fascism. I do not think a reasonable person can hear me say that and think
So, by the way, not to whataboutism, but hey, far-right commentator Anna Perez suggests that the proper response to the latest Trump indictment is armed revolution. Why else would we have a Second Amendment?
Was an insurrection. What else would it be? And what happened is people stood up against the tyrants that were basically controlling their every move. You had all of these intolerable acts. They were taxed to death over tea, over a slew of other things. They couldn't trade freely. Okay, they were living under absolute tyranny. And what did they decide to do? They decided to take up arms against the government. They formed militias in their communities, and they took up arms against the most powerful military in the world.
I think that's a bit more of a call to action, I would say. If we're talking about the two different extremes of political ideology in the United States, this is one that is kind of clearly stating the purpose. Whereas if Sam's like, hey, by the way, it seems like the other side is doing a handful of things that you can certainly say are steps towards fascism, identifying that is not the same. Different things are different.
Are we not living under very similar circumstances here in America? Does this not call?
Like Tim Pool the other day tweeted out about the fact that you're in a second civil war. I think both Charlie Kirk, Benny Johnson, and a handful of other right-wing pundits have all stated that these are like the early salvos of a civil war, or that you're already in the middle of a civil war. It seems like one side is decidedly saying like, hey, by the way, not only are we in the midst of something violent, but you are a part of it.
For the same, if not a similar response to that situation. Why else?
No, Sitch is mad about fucking Sam Seder. He says because Sam Seder is pointing out that there's a handful of things that the DeSantis administration are doing that certainly are reflective historically of things traditionally towards the march of fascism. you know, the silencing, the what is it, the vilification of mass media, the banning of books, the call to a time that was previously now idealized to return to its proper form, a strong man vilifying and ostracizing and othering specific groups, and then you know, banning books related and media related to those specific groups. Like, those are the things that, yes, Sam Seder would point out and identify. And they're saying that that was basically, some people could interpret that as a call to violence.
Need to go assassinate a governor. I mean, I don't know what to tell you. That's my opinion. It's my perception.
So, well, this is, I mean, I feel like you're kind of making my point, is that when you frame, you know, all these things in society is basically leading us down this pathway to the destruction of our society, to living into.
Well, I didn't say the destruction of our society.
Well, destruction of democracy, I guess, because you're talking about we're going to live under a fascistic rule. I do think it would be reasonable that a reasonable person would want to prevent us from living in a fascistic rule if they believe and interpret it the way that you're kind of laying it out. And
well, I think it's reasonable for people not to want the country to be fascist, but that doesn't mean it's reasonable for them to think that assassinating a governor is going to inhibit that.
It's interesting because not only did you have this guy call in and literally.
No, I didn't have the guy.
Okay, I'm sorry. A guy called into your show. Okay.
Yes.
You had a guy call into your show, and he was saying that he thinks the left should start advocating for violence, and he was saying that he thought revolutions were only successful with violence. And after that guy said that, you read a message. You had, I don't know how you have some sort of like messages come in, and you read it out, and I don't think you knew what the guy meant, because the message said, hey caller, you should read Nelson Mandela's speech that he gave as a closing statement to his trial. Do you know what speech he's talking about?
Tell us. No, I'm not familiar. No.
So the speech that the message that you read was talking about is it's called the I'm prepared to die speech. And it's Nelson Mandela talking exactly about how they.
So shouldn't you be asking this to them? Because this is like the 4th time in a row where you tried to, like, you know, put this on Sam, when it's like, so this was someone you had call into the show. No, it didn't. This is just the caller. We have a call-in show. People call in from all kinds of political walks and ideologies. Okay, fine. So that caller in the show, you know, did you speak for them? No, I don't. Okay, well, did you know that one of the comments made by another commenter on that commenter, do you know what they said and what they were referencing?
His movement tried to use nonviolence to fight oppression and to get the political change they want, and it didn't work. So now him and his movement is completely morally justified to use violence to get what they want.
I don't think that we have come anywhere close as a society to exhausting civil disobedience. I don't even think we've come.
No, listen, I'm glad. I'm very glad that you say that. But you have people calling your show who don't think that way, obviously.
Yes, but I would not in any way look at your comment section here on YouTube, pick one out, and hold you responsible for a comment section specifically based upon the idea that you're saying, like, I disagree that the country is going fascist, therefore a reasonable person would go out and assassinate an Antifa person or something like that. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, see, if I look here, C.L. Davies, does Sitch think violence is never called for? Nelson Mandela lived in freaking apartheid South Africa. So is this someone who was watching Sitch, and now based on what Sitch has said, is taking what I can only assume to be, based on the words of this random commenter, potentially violent action? Was this inspired by the very words on the stream?
Right.
You're really interested in claiming that, despite the fact that I specifically said to this individual, I don't think that violence is the answer. And despite the fact that I have said very often on the show, and just the idea that, it's not just me saying this about fact. There are academics who believe that we are on the verge of fascism, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, this is not a wild-eyed, fantastical idea. I've been doing this for 20 years, and it's only until recently I think that, like, there is a burgeoning fascist element to this country, and I don't think that a reasonable person would interpret what I've just said on your show, that they should go out and assassinate people. I don't know what to tell you. You keep repeating the same point over and over again, but I'm not going to change my opinion.
Let me just say, I guess, 2 things to kind of to conclude this, though you can respond, obviously. The first is that, if you were in that video that you uploaded, if you were kind of condemning violence as strongly to the caller and to your audience as you were right here, I would feel very different about this. I just felt you seemed, and people can watch for themselves, I don't know why, you seemed very uncomfortable to take a very strong stance against violence, which now you don't. You seem very, adamant about it, which I appreciate.
Listen, when somebody calls into the show, we get people call into the show, okay? And when
I'm glad to learn that you're not like, you know, a radical communist here, Sam, and you're not trying to get a violent revolution to take place. And I'm just glad we can sort that out because, I mean, previous to this conversation, it was pretty much out there.
Someone is expressing like, I have, when someone calls in like that, it is, you don't know who this person is. You don't know what their mental state is. You don't know what's going on there. And so I try and be sensitive to, you know, who's there and what's going to be the best way, particularly when someone starts.
If Sitch is going to lie about the speech, it's worth clarifying that Mandela's speech was specifically about how engaging in violence and property destruction must be directed at oppressive infrastructure itself rather than the people who run it. It is literally a speech against the violence they're actually referring to.
To express something like those views, the best way to try and sort of unwind them, okay? And there's not many shows that take unscreened phone calls, and there's not many shows that take unscreened IMs. I don't know if there are any.
But you're not a psychologist. You're not just talking to this guy. You're talking to
I know I'm not a
audience.
psychologist.
Right,
exactly.
but that's what I mean. You're
I'm
talking
not.
to an audience. And to me, the
I'm
audience,
not
Wait, are you?
audience
I'm not a
away from it is
psychologist.
more
And
important.
so I'm just doing in that moment what I think is the most responsible thing I can do to make sure that that person's bad ideas don't grow and fester. And so if you think that I didn't respond with the proper sort of like emotion or whatever it is, you know, to this call, I don't know what to tell you. Don't watch the show.
Okay. Well, I'm glad, you know, you said that you wouldn't pick out a comment from our comment section and you know, paint our show with it, which I appreciate because we do have, you know, crazy people kind of, you know, talk to everyone and comment on their show. So, I mean, but do you think, you know, it's just interesting that you said that because, you know, that caused so much of a controversy for Emma when she did that to Tim Pool. I mean, she picked out that one guy, the shooter, and said that that was indicative of Tim Pool's audience. I mean, do you think that that was an unfair characterization for her to make?
This is so wild. I mean, this is something that is incredibly specific, right? If you have an individual who was a neo-Nazi mass shooter and who was inspired by far-right white supremacist ideology, which is now wildly documented, despite the fact that it was downplayed by most of the right for a very long time, but hey, we finally got there, and they admit to it. In the list of things that were inspiring him, amongst them being libs of TikTok, for example, one of them happened to be, yes, the ideology of far-right white supremacists. One of those individuals happens to be Nick Fuentes. Now, you could point out what would have been a much better defense, that the episode specific to Tim Pool that were watched by that person happened to be ones in which he was interviewing white supremacists, white nationalists, neo-Nazis. So you could be like, okay, well, he just specifically picked a couple episodes where I was interviewing some really far-right individuals. And it's like, okay, fine. That would have been a more adequate defense of the fact that he is not directly being inspired by Tim Pool, but that would still fall flat on the fact that, like, there's a reason why a white supremacist might want to watch your show. It's because you have a lot of white supremacists on your show. If you have like a rotating carousel of fucking right-wing extremists, and then a right-wing extremist mass shooter, it's like, yeah, I watched the episodes with the right-wing extremists. That should kind of be a sobering moment, no? There should be a moment like, yes, well, this is a little bit different than someone just randomly in one of the comments being like, I am inspired by Tim Pool, I'm going to go do mass shooting. A little bit different than that.
I mean, to be totally honest with you, I wasn't terribly familiar with that guy who had. I wasn't terribly familiar with that guy who had, you know, watched like a white
His
supremacist
screenshots of a Tim Pool video.
Yeah, I mean, I wasn't terribly familiar with that, with that whole case. Do I think that's indicative of? I think that, like, if you platform, generically speaking, okay, to be fair, because I don't know necessarily the details of that Tim Pool thing. But I think that if you platform, and I know that Tim in the past is at least platform people that I would consider that way. I think he has Jack Posobiec, you know, co-hosting his shows or something. But if you platform these people without critiquing them in any way, I do think you deserve some responsibility for the message that they're putting out. You're giving them credibility, I think. I mean, I think it's okay to have people you disagree with on. And I think it's okay to have, like, you know, you can put on, I think, you know, horrible people on your show. But I think that you as a host set some type of tone, like you're arguing, right? That I should have been harsher with this guy who called in saying that he is, you know, sort of fantasizing about violence or whatever it was specifically he said. But I do think you have a responsibility in that moment to signal to your audience that these ideas and this person who espouses these ideas are wrong. I mean, I think that's, I mean, today, you know, we had Ryan Grimm on, who I quite like, both personally, and I think he's a great journalist. But he, you know, came on a week ago, and there was a couple of things that he had cited that it took a while for me to figure it out with the help of people on Twitter that were misstatements that I think, are really unhelpful. And I made a point of correcting that today, because I do think that there is a responsibility. And so, yes, I think that, I mean, I don't know about the specifics of Tim's case, but I do think that, yes, if you have fascists or white supremacists on, or, bad people in general on, however you define them, then I think, yeah, you have a responsibility to push back on that, so that you are signaling to people, these are bad ideas.
Yeah, no, I mean, I agree completely. That's why I felt like you weren't pushing back strong enough against the caller. That was my whole point. I mean,
yes,
I agree. You have to push back against these things.
I mean, I think I pushed back against him, but I can see that you didn't feel
well, we're approaching an hour and 15 minutes.
Yeah, totally.
If you have to go.
I do.
Okay.
I have one question before we leave,
before you ask that question, I want to thank you for coming on. You definitely lasted significantly longer than Jimmy Dore, who ran after the second question. But
well, like I say, I'm not. Jimmy and I have a bit of a disagreement on just about everything.
Hi, you just listened to a clip from the Sitch and Adams show. If you like,
I do not feel I gained much from that. It was just like a false accusation for a full 30 minutes. Do you enjoy the Serfs but prefer not to have to use your eyeballs? Many are saying this. Well, we've got the solution for you. It's the Serf Times in podcast form. Available on most major podcasting networks now. If you enjoy it, please consider leaving a good review and feedback, because it really helps the show out, apparently, and it's free, just like the podcast.
Thank you kindly to our Lord and Saviors Peyton L. Just and Xander Corvus. Without you, we are nothing. And now, a shout out to our Knights of the Square Table. Amazing Flesh, Anna Loves Riley, Adrian McCarthy, DM Rivera, Doug Cady, Everything Important, Hegbard Celine, Izzy Solidarity, La Media Panza, Matthew Scarborough, Multimondi, Nettle, Omni, Peanut Butter Blonde, Political Papi, Quiet 185, Rachel K, Riley and Anna, Roller Dragon, Kubi, Cernicus, Spinach Monster, Stellar Vision, Sebastian Dimmel, Thomas, Trevbot EXE, Lucidry, Words Greenwood, Cheryl Alvarez, Tony Perkins, Thomas, O'Pecker, Travis McClinton, and Victoria Bell. Thank you so much. And a huge shout out to all the other people who make this entire show possible. Without you, it would not exist. If you can support us, please go to patreon.com/theserfs, and even $1 can help unlock all of the little goodies and help make this show entirely possible.